Good afternoon from Düsseldorf. Good afternoon from Düsseldorf Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And warm welcome to many countries as far as I see the participants list. And also warm welcome to many startups from, well, in Germany, probably most of them from the Düsseldorf area. My name is Robert Butchen and I'm the moderator of our webinar, Going International, Question and Answer for Global Business. We do this webinar within the next 2 hours in the framework of two major projects. One project is Startup Woche Düsseldorf, a yearly week which we do in Düsseldorf in order to bring lots of useful information to our startups here. And we are very happy to participate in this very good project in order to push our startup community here in Düsseldorf. And the other project is the Startup Germany Tour, which is also an initiative in order to bring international startups to the German market and to link international startups with German partners, and also a very good project in which we participate now, I think for more than 3 years already. All right. So I told you within the next 2 hours, we do not want to tell you only things by ourselves within the next 2 hours. We would like to finish our contents of what you have to tell to you maybe within the next hour or 70 minutes, and then go over to a question and answer session. So you are more than welcome to ask us your questions, because we expect that you will find many things what we tell to you in a way that you want to go more into detail on your business. And you're free to put your questions into the chat room which we have here in our webinar. Just a little introduction of what we do with you within this webinar, and an introduction of my colleagues. So what we have to tell to you is a kind of crash course for international business. We would like to give you some ideas how to organize maybe your marketing strategy. We would like to make you aware of things, of obstacles, of risks which you might encounter on international markets, and that in both directions. Like in Germany for the Startup Germany Tour participants, and of course in other countries for the Startup Woche Düsseldorf participants, in a way like that. And I do that together with my colleagues, with Katrin Lange and Savas Poiras. So we are part of the International Business Division here in the Düsseldorf Chamber. I will focus on the search for business partners worldwide. Katrin will focus on international contracts, because she has a juridical background, so we'll give you ideas on that. And Savas, she is very much into things which are related to customs and the movements of goods. Hard stuff for many people. He will give you a survey on the aspects which are maybe crucial for you if you're sending or receiving goods from other countries. So that's a little schedule of what we will have to do, of what we would like to do with you within the next an hour and a half. Well, this Going International webinar, we do that already for 16 years, by the way, and what you get to know from us is, in fact, very classical stuff. I think it's a little bit different from most of the things you get to know, especially within the other webinars of Startup Woche Düsseldorf. It's classical stuff. That means that applies, in fact, to every company which is doing international business. Doesn't matter if you're a startup or if you're an established company. It's very much related to all kinds of companies, and please be aware that not everything we tell you really applies to what you do. You will find that some parts of maybe some context of what we have to tell you doesn't apply to you at all. On the other hand, some things might be very, very interesting or significant or crucial to you. So don't be afraid of missing anything. Of course, we will send to you the presentation afterwards. You will also find many links within our presentation. You will find many internet addresses. You do not have to make notes. you will get everything afterwards, and having the presentation afterwards, you can also decide on what content concerns you and which content maybe not. A little bit of digital housekeeping. We all got very much aware and familiar with webinars, maybe not so much with this one, with Adobe Connect. But anyway, before we start, some basic functions of the webinar room. In the top menu bar, you will find two icons, a speaker and a hand signal icon. Use the small triangles next to the icons to make individual settings. You can turn your speakers or headphones on and off and adjust the volume. With the hand signal icon, you can communicate your status or tell the moderators whether they should speak louder or quieter, faster or slower. You should also make frequent use of the questions area below the slides. In this field, you may put your questions. If your question really is concerning the actual content, we will come back to that immediately. Otherwise, we will collect the questions and answer them later on. Okay, no question is lost. Please be aware that due to data protections, you can only see your own questions, not the questions from the other participants. Okay, that's it for the beginning. And now we start with our presentation. So my part is basically about looking for business partners worldwide, giving you some ideas what you might do. You do not have to do it. Decide on yourself if it might be useful to you or not. Okay, maybe at the beginning, thinking about strategic approaches. Can I use a reactive strategy, or can I use an active strategy? The answer is quite clear for 99% of us. We probably have to use an active strategy. A reactive strategy means that we have already customers that we are found. That's good. If you are maybe somebody who owns a global brand, yeah, I suppose most of us do not have a global brand. Yeah, so we have to create a global brand, and we have to get to know with potential business partners we would like to be contacted from. Yeah, so our strategy should be active. Maybe it's reactive if I have a good website at the end and people find me, but that's, of course, I think for many of those the way to go. What are possible indicators for the selection of markets? It might be volume, it might be a growth of market, and for many of us it's definitely specific characteristics, and in many cases, in many business cases related to sectors, to certain sectors. Speaking about volume as an indicator, the slide you see here is nothing else but the German charts, the German football Bundesliga table, but not about football, about our major trading partners. Yeah, and on the left-hand side in blue you see our export partners, and on the left-hand side you see the export partners. On the right-hand side in the red you see the import partners. Something about our export markets. Number one, United States. Number two, China. And then countries in Europe. That changed within the last 10 years a lot. Yeah, United States is now on top of our business partners for about 5 years. Before it used to be France. And China, they claimed the second place, I think, 2 years ago. Yeah, that changed a little bit. Anyway, apart from United States and China, it's very much concentrated on European countries. Yeah, number 3, France. Number 4, Netherlands. And number 5, United Kingdom. Still United Kingdom, but unfortunately, the volumes are not increasing, but decreasing. Looking to the other side, to the import side. On top is China. I think that's not very surprising to most of you. Position 2, we have a small country west of here, the Netherlands. And that's something you have to know in order to understand the way our economy works here, especially in the part of Germany we're in North Rhine-Westphalia. Yeah, the Netherlands are a very important partner to us, and that has not only to do with the fact that it's a very prospering economy, but also it has to do with the fact that the seaports, especially in Rotterdam, are very significant and important to us and to our economy here. Yeah, and so that's you always get to know that if you would make if you are doing business out of Düsseldorf, you always have to keep in mind that our very important business partner, Netherlands, is very close to us. United States, and then we have the European countries, Poland, France, Italy. And if you compare both columns, the export and the import column, you find one country in the import countries from Europe which you won't find in the export countries. That's the Czech Republic. And you find one country in the export column which you won't find in the import column. But that's for the first year in 2020. Before we had the United Kingdom within this column. But unfortunately, they got out of it. Unfortunately. Selection of markets, volume of markets. Speaking about Germany, yes, and this is more for the international startups who are thinking about, well, if you want to get a foot on the German market, where to do that? Our answer is quite obvious. The place to be and the place to make business is North Rhine-Westphalia. And in Düsseldorf, we are in the capital of North Rhine-Westphalia and in the center of it. Yeah, so what you see here is that 22% of the volumes of goods who are getting into Germany have its destination in North Rhine-Westphalia. And position 2 and 3, you see Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg. And these are also countries with a strong industrial background. But anyway, our message is the place to be is in North Rhine-Westphalia and very likely in Düsseldorf. Speaking about growth, yeah, this table is the increase of export growth for German exports from 2019 compared to 2014. A little tricky thing to look at, but I think it's very, very useful to have a look here on these figures. And what you see here is not so much different from the chart you saw with the two columns. Anyway, if you want to say that, or if you want to point out that some markets are quite dynamic, number one, China, and number two, it's really Netherlands again. Yeah, so the international trade is very much here taking place with the Netherlands. Number three, Poland, a market on which we have continuously increasing activities with many, many companies, not only with big companies. And also United States is for us one of the booming markets, despite maybe the last president which didn't like this idea so much, but this is history, of course. And then again, European countries, Italy, Czech Republic, Austria, Switzerland, Spain, and also Hungary. So many of these countries are in Central Europe. This is a very psychological table, yeah? And you have to know that once in a year we organize a survey of German companies and ask them about their business forecasts in some parts of the world and also worldwide. And of course some companies say that they have good expectations, other companies say that they have bad expectations, and what we do is we make a balance of that. Are you expecting better business worldwide or in certain regions, or are you expecting worse business than in the last year? And in 2021, unfortunately, in these difficult COVID times, 10% of the companies had worse business expectations than better business expectations for their worldwide business. Yes, and compared to 2020, it has been only 6. So the overall atmosphere is not so good, to be honest. Yeah, we were used to have better figures on that within the last years, but it's also very interesting to look on the regions. Yeah, so with Asia Pacific, it's already quite optimistic. Yeah, 1%, especially if you have a look on China. China, 15% more better than worse. Okay. Then North America, companies are quite optimistic. Yeah. Within Europe also, with the exception of United Kingdom, yeah, as you can see, with minus 51% are expecting worse business than last year. And also the expectations for Latin America, for Eastern, Southeastern Europe, and for the Middle East and Africa might be better, really. Yeah, we would really like our companies to get into a better mood and to change these figures. All right, now some practical stuff about how can I find international business partners, because without partners you cannot do business internationally. That's right. Could I be found abroad, or do I have to search? How can I be found? Can I communicate with international partners, or how can I communicate with international parties? Or may I sell my products and services abroad? Yeah, and these are only some questions everyone should put for themselves and maybe create some answers. And in order to get some answers, we want to give you some practical advice. But anyway, you could always keep that in mind. First of all, some very useful information, sources for information, which applies more or less to both of these groups. Yeah. What Germany has is an agency called Germany Trade and Invest, with a very good website called gtai.de. And within these websites, you have two main menus. One is the one for investors. You have to put on invest, and there you find a lots of info about doing business in Germany. Yeah, and you find it not only in German language, of course, you find it also in English language, and some of the stuff also in other languages, in Chinese basically. Yeah, for those who are looking after ideas or after information, for instance, about company law or immigrating to Germany in English, you can find info there. And for those who are approaching international markets from Germany, you should have a look on the export side, yeah, and you find lots of market information for basically every country in the world. Yeah. Not only market information, you also find practical information about the framework of law, about, for instance, how to provide services, how to pass staff to other countries, and so on and so on. Yeah, it's always worth having a look on this page, on this site, and you should really aware that this website exists. Then ahk.de, this applies more to the German startups. If you're interested in working with a certain country, you have to know that there probably is a counterpart, a German chamber abroad in the other countries. We have that in more than 90 countries, on 140 locations, and you should be aware that there's, for instance, a German-Russian Chamber of Commerce if you're doing business with Russia. Yeah? And you find also lots of info about the business networks, the German business network, and also practical info on via this portal. This is in fact a portal, ahk.de, but then you can choose, of course, the website of the respective German Chamber of Commerce abroad in one of all these countries. And Düsseldorf.ihk.de, this is our website. This more applies to the German startups. We have lots of info about international markets on our website, but sorry for the international startups, only in German language. 6 ways to get to know and communicate with German international companies. Yeah, these are very basic ways what you might do in order to get to know about international partners, in order to get to know about the markets you're approaching. Please decide for yourself if they're helpful or not. For some of these, for some of you some might be interesting, for some of you maybe not so much. Yeah, starting with databases. I do not speak about, business platforms like Alibaba or eBay or whatever. Yeah, these are quite global things. What I have to tell you has more to do with a B2B approach. And you should know that coming from the old tradition of big books in which you find sectoral info, you find today's websites which are quite good and clearly structured in order to find companies in certain sectors. Yeah. And if you speak about Germany, you should have an eye on compass.com, you should have an eye on europages.de, and you should have an eye on wlw.de. If you, for instance, are looking for companies, if you're looking for manufacturers of plastic pipes for the use in bathrooms, for instance, you can put that into the functions on these websites, and you will find some useful results. It's not only for the German market. These pages, the first ones, 3 ones, are very much focused on the German market, but you can also use them for other markets in other countries. Yeah, and of course these kind of databases exist also not only in Germany, in other countries. If you're looking for something in India, for instance, TradeIndia.com might be an option, ThomasNet for the USA, or maybe the Golden Pages in Belgium. Yeah, and the good thing for all those who are not familiar of French or Dutch languages which are spoken in Belgium, this website is also in English. What you can also do, especially for those looking for partners or for our potential customers in Germany, you can consult the member directories of industry and sector federations. Yeah, for instance, if you want to have a look on possible customers or suppliers or whatever within the German engineering industry, you find a lot of useful information on vdma.org. Yeah, or speaking about big digital companies in Germany, you find them on bitkom.org. And if you're very specialized on, let me say, honey, and you're looking for honey traders, it's just an example, yeah, there is something called the Honigverband, and you find also the honey traders on this website. Moreover, we have cooperation websites, yeah, under weuropa.de, which is organized in the framework of the European Union, or xpost.de, Business Finder, that's organized in the framework of the German Ministry of Economics. Just some ideas, decide for yourself if they are helpful or not. A very important aspect in Germany, if we speak about international business, is trade shows. Because in Germany we are accustomed to have many important trade shows in our country, and especially here in Düsseldorf we are accustomed to have many good trade shows here in our city. And of course we hope that we will get them back after the COVID. Yeah. At the moment they are not taking place, but you have to know that for instance Medica is the most important trade show for everything which has to do with health industry. Yeah, this is a trade show which is taking place every year in Düsseldorf. And in fact, you find in many sectors the leading events, the leading trade shows in Germany. Yeah, 7 of the 10 biggest European fairgrounds are in Germany. And you should be aware that probably also in the sector you are, there still is a big physical trade show in Germany. Yeah. Examples from Düsseldorf, apart from Medica, is Interpack for packaging, Glasstec for glass manufacturing, K for plastic industry, Tube and Wire for, well, Tube and Wire as the name says, or even Provine for the wine business, yeah, if you are in that sector. If trade shows in Germany are more or less interesting to you, have a look on auma.de. That's where you find all the trade shows in Germany. Not only in Germany, you find also international trade shows in other countries on auma.de, but of course in other platforms. There are many, so I do not want to point out some certain examples. Yeah, but what I have to tell to you, especially for the German startups, is of course that you can use international platforms also to get an info and an insight of international markets. Yeah. And so it's always worth to have a look on the websites of the international trade shows, always worth to have a look on the exhibitors directories, and maybe sometimes after the COVID again, it might be useful, sorry for that, it might be useful to visit these trade shows in other countries. Anyway, before you exhibit, it might be useful to get an impression of the exhibitions, because exhibiting costs a lot of money, yeah, especially for startups. And well, but it might be used for one day, yeah. And then, of course, the question is if there are subsidies, yeah. So in Germany, we have, for instance, about 350 trade shows which are supported with German pavilions in many countries, yeah. And you can see them on these links here, yeah. We have also some trade shows which are subsidized in the framework of the government of North Rhine-Westphalia. And we have a very nice possibility to get subsidies for Trade Show International, which is called Kleingruppenförderprogramm. This applies to the German startups only. You can get some extra money, so you can get some subsidies if you're exhibiting in small groups on trade fairs. You can choose when you organize a group of minimum 3 exhibitors. Yeah, if you have questions on that, please come back to us. Sectoral business media. What do I mean with sectoral business media? Of course, we have, well, in Germany, we are accustomed to have, you know, a newspaper for everything. This is, for instance, a newspaper for the retail trade for food. Yeah, Lebensmittelpraxis, yeah, and you find also Lebensmittelzeitung. So if you are into this sector, you should know that these media exist, and sometimes they also exist in English language, but then more probably on the European platform. Yeah, and of course you find also these media, not only printed but also online, for everything. So if you approach, for instance, gas station managers, you have the Tankstelle Magazin. Yeah, just an example. Yeah, and of course this applies also to other parts of the world. And here are also some examples. Yeah, this is Handelszeitung.at is the retail platform, the retail media, which is the leading one in Austria, just for instance, and Packaging Europe and so on, Packworld and Packaging News.co.uk are just some examples about media and the packaging industry if you're interested in that sector. Yeah, and of course you find many examples on that worldwide, just to get you aware with an idea how you can get info on international markets. Delegations and trade missions. Yeah, so we are all involved also in the export promotion program of our state here, of North Rhine-Westphalia. And within that framework, well, we have a selection of delegation trips we organize every year. Of course, not during COVID-19 and also not in 2021, but we are very confident to be back in 2022 with examples, delegations to Israel, for startups to the United States, New York, Boston, or maybe some classical delegations with also for established companies like with railway suppliers. Last year or 2 years ago, we went to Switzerland, and maybe we go next year to the United Kingdom for that. Yeah, and you also find, well, in Germany, you also find then a survey of lots of these delegation trips, which are not only by the North Rhine-Westphalian government, by also promoted by the federal government. And the Startup Germany tour is something which goes into the other direction. Of course, well, we can only do it in a digital way. Last year we did it in the digital way. This year we do it in a digital way, but of course we hope that in 2022 we will be back for welcoming startups from all over the world here in North Rhine-Westphalia again. To go into detail about the German network of chambers of commerce abroad, yeah, and ahk.de, just some more on what they are offering. Of course, they're offering business networks. They offer also lots of services. Yeah, for instance, if you need some support on the tax-related side, yeah, especially companies which offer services in other countries, they may need something like a tax reference or something. You can do that with the help of the German Chamber of Commerce abroad, AHK network. Yeah, and just to get you familiar with the idea to consult that and to have a look on what our partners in other countries have to offer to you. Yeah. By the way, we will share that. We will share, of course, the presentation later on. Yeah, because it contains lots of links and ideas, and you will get that later on, and then you can click and will find all these links and ideas back. Right, and the last point, just a recommendation. Yeah. Of course, you are very good very much into digital business, and you know how to approach or what you have to, what you do to make your website interesting, or what you do social media wise. What we would like to really think about is adapt the content. Yeah, because when you approach the German markets and you don't do it in a very, let me say, appropriate way, sometimes it looks a little bit ridiculous. Yeah. So be careful, for instance, with computerized translation. Yeah. In most of the cases, it doesn't look very professional. So if you, for instance, translate your website into German, let it be done by someone who knows German. Yeah. And of course, the other way around, the same applies to German startups or German companies who are looking for an international web presence. Do it in a professional way. Yeah. Do it with somebody who is best choice is letting it be done by somebody who is a native speaker of the language you would like to get presented in. And also be aware, if you do that, you should also be able to answer the questions which come to you. Yeah. So if you are, for instance, making a French language website, the people in French-speaking countries may think that you can also be contacted in French language. Then you should have somebody in your company who is aware of French. Just a very rough example on that. Yeah. Also respect, please, legal standards. They are quite strong in Germany, for instance, and of course, especially do that when you install an online shop, which is then also accessible to other countries. Just something from our own chamber. We are offering a workshop on digital communication with Chinese partners on the 24th of June. Yeah. More for the German startups or for the German companies. If you're interested in joining that, please have a look on that. All right, that's lots of info, lots of ideas, I hope, to many of yours. Yeah. Just one last thing. If you stay in contact with us, get registered for our newsletter. Yeah, and this applies more to the German startups because the newsletter is in German. Yeah. Every month we give you a survey of new things, practical advice. We keep you updated about legal changes in international business, and we keep you updated about our upcoming projects and events. Yeah. All right. Yeah. So don't be afraid. You will get the presentation later on. That's for the beginning. In order to find international business partners. Now I switch over to my colleague, to Katrin Lange, and she is doing the next logical step, because now we assume that you have found your business partners, but now you have to do a contract, and a clear and good contract. And Katrin will give you some advice on that.
Well, thank you very much, Robert, for this really useful information. And as some of the comments already said, yeah, very many links and references. So welcome from my side as well. I would like to welcome all participants from Startup Woche Düsseldorf and also all our international startups within the Startup Germany Tour 2021. So within the next 10 to 15 minutes, I would like to talk about some legal aspects you might encounter when dealing with international contracts, for instance, with international sales contracts. And yeah, you might already guess, with 10 to 15 minutes, I can only provide you with very, very brief information and a very brief introduction of this complex issue. But my aim today is that at the end of my presentation, you might have heard of some of the challenges in order to ask the right questions to yourself or to your lawyer, or that you might think about getting some more information or further information, because now you are aware that that could be a problem. So, and you know where the pitfalls are, and I hope you will be more aware of some of the topics I'm touching today. So what's the agenda for today? First, I would like to talk about the contract partners. I would like to talk about governing law, court of jurisdiction, arbitration, general terms and conditions, and then maybe in the end, talk about if you need a lawyer or not, if you should do some of the things in-house. You can also use this agenda. That's very practical because it's also a little checklist when you have an international contract. You can use this agenda and just say, okay, have I talked about what is about the contract partner? Did we talk about the governing law, the court of jurisdiction and stuff like that? So use this as a checklist in the future. So first of all, I want to talk about your contract partner. And if you talk about contract partners, then sometimes it's not so much of a legal problem, because some of the issues that you might face are not legal at all. But as I have it from my practical experience here in the chamber, most of the problems arise from misunderstandings, because both sides, the seller and the buyer, were not talking about the right things. They were not talking about the right issues, or they did not use the same language, or they just did not negotiate it in a way that it's that it would be efficient. And so first of all, you always have to keep in mind when you are talking with somebody from another country, you must be aware that you might live in different legal systems, that you speak different languages, and not only different languages, the words might mean something different. And we talk about different legal cultures. And of course, we talk about how to negotiate a contract within an intercultural setting. If we talk about civil law, for instance, then Germany, of course, would be one example of the civil law legal system, of France as well. But if we talk about civil law, then we talk maybe about the USA or with contract partners from Canada, Australia, India. And we are talking about Islamic law as well. So please be aware that the person you're talking to might be from a totally different legal background. Cultural aspects are very important, and you should take enough time in the beginning of the negotiation to think about the meaning of this contract, of this international contract. And if you take some time in the beginning, then this might save you lots of time and money in the end. So what are the typical questions what we get as a chamber? So some of the typical questions are, which language should be the binding language within for your contract? So sometimes you see the contracts and they have like 2 columns, in English one and maybe another language. So make sure that you know which column is the right contract. The other one would be a non-binding translation, because that's very important in order to interpret the contract. In the end, you have to know what is the binding language. Then, do you know your contract partner? Is the company reliable? Where do I find out more about the contract partner? And it's also very important, is the person who is signing the contract, was this person allowed? Did she have proxy? Is she allowed to sign the contract? And yeah, and those are just some examples what you have to take into consideration when you start negotiating a contract, and maybe when you first get the first draft of an international contract. Okay, a second thing that you might now you know it, is that you always have to put into your contract a clause, what laws should be governing the contract. So, and this is really something that companies tend to forget within their contracts, to say, okay, what do I do with the choice of law? Which law do I choose? And you have to think about it, that it's something that you can choose. If you do not choose it, then maybe a court will do the choice for you. And so in general, that's very good that you have a free choice to choose whichever governing law, at least in Germany, whichever governing law you want to choose. But of course, it should be practical. So it's very important within your international contract that you specifically state which law should be applicable for your contract. And otherwise the court will choose for you, and so then they might use for instance, where is the seat of the contract partners, where is the incorporation, or where is the main question of the contract maybe lying. Then very important, if you choose, for instance, German law, then within international contracts of goods, it's very important for you to know that the so-called UN, United Nations law, the United Nations Convention on Contracts for the international sales of goods, is part of the German law. So just in case that you stated in your international contract for certain goods that you want German law to be applicable, then please keep in mind that the UN law for this contract is applicable. Sometimes companies forget that it's then governed under the rules of the UN law, and but that's very good. So because 80% of the German trade is within countries being partner countries of the UN law, and but in some cases it might be time worthy to think about to exclude the UN law. And that's also possible. So you're quite free in order to draft this part of the contract. One of the things that you also should think about right now is act of God, höhere Gewalt, as we call it, and also the UN law has certain provisions for that. Due to the COVID pandemic, it has been one of the main issues companies were facing, the so-called act of good, because then the supply chains were broken down for a certain amount of time, and then companies had lots of questions. Okay, what comes next? So how do we deal with the contract now? What can we do? And also you should take into consideration the question, what covers the law? Because some of the institutions, as we know it in Germany, for instance, Eigentumsvorbehalt, they are not known in very many other countries, for instance. So you always have to think about, are there institutions that might not be known in another country? And that's why, even so we choose German law, they might not be applicable in certain other countries. All right, the court of jurisdiction, that's of course the court if something, if you have a problem and it's not working anymore and now you have to go to court, then you should put into your contract at least a provision, where do you want to go to court, and yeah, so that's very important, where to go. But of course, you always have to keep in mind, if you, for instance, choose Germany, you have to, in advance, you should try to see whether it's a court decision from a German court would be, yeah, if it's you can go with this court decision to another country, and if they would enforce it. So that's a very complex question, but you should have this in mind, and now you've heard about it, and yeah, so it's really important that you take a look into this, where you want to enforce a foreign court decision, if that's possible. And it's also worthwhile to think about arbitration, but arbitration is something when we talk about bigger money. So example for arbitration organizations are, for instance, yeah, the International Court of Arbitration of the ICC in Paris, or the arbitration courts in London, Vienna, Stockholm, very famous, or the Deutsche Institut für Schiedsgerichtsbarkeit, DIS in Bonn. So for you, please keep in mind that arbitration is something different than mediation. So you should always try to see whether a mediation might be relevant, or yeah, if there's the possibility of doing a mediation before you go to court. And that's usually not in a courtroom, the mediation. So, but in your contract, if you talk about arbitration, then it's something like a court decision. Okay, then general terms and conditions. Just one word, make sure that you do not have clauses which are completely opposite. So if you have yeah, general terms and conditions from your seller or buyer, and the other partner has general terms of conditions, make sure that you know what you were talking about and that they are not totally opposite. And also one practical question from our side: if you have something relevant or something that you want to have in your contract that is important to you, I would suggest that you put it into your contract and that you do not put it into the general terms and conditions. So if it's something really important, make sure that it's included into the contract. So that might save some time and trouble. So, and in the end, of course, I mean, Mr. Butchen always talks about all the great things and all the great stuff and all the opportunities. And I'm usually the one who has to talk about, well, you have to think about some of the things. But I do want to encourage you to do international sales or to do international expansion. But I just want to give you an idea of what you have to take into consideration. And you, of course, we are in a legal world, and so you should be prepared that you might encounter some challenges, but all of those challenges are manageable. And so there are so many success stories of international startups coming to North Rhine-Westphalia, or of startups from North Rhine-Westphalia going abroad. So everything is manageable. You just need to know for yourself, do I have the capacity to do it on my own, or should I do it with external power, with external expertise? And that's the same, yeah, how to do it with, yeah, when you think about the question, yeah, should I ask a lawyer or not? And it's better to spend some money beforehand, and yeah, better safe than sorry. And you can imagine that as a chamber, we get so many questions, and then usually it might be too late. So rather spend the money in advance, and then you are probably safe. Okay. Further information, and again, very useful links from the German chambers abroad, from Germany Trade and Invest. the lawyers list of the German embassies. And of course, if you want to know more about the UN laws, you will find more information here as well. And with this being said, I think we go and take I would like to hand over to Mr. Peuratz.
Yeah, thank you very much, dear colleague. Ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome also on my behalf. After the juristical setting, I will have a focus on the cross-border movement of goods, imports and export regulations, which are to be considered when you are moving goods from one country to another country, either if it's the import or if it's the export. My name is Savas Peuratz, and I'm an executive for customs and foreign trade law at the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. So I'm also inviting you, please post your questions that you might have regarding regarding the import of goods to the European Union, or regarding goods exporting out of Germany, out of the European Union. The agenda that I've prepared for you is, first of all, I would like to give you an overview of the regulations for the cross-border movement of goods. Then we will take a little step back and look for the prerequisites which are required for a company in order to import or to export goods into the European Union or out of the European Union. Then we will take a look at the so-called customs tariff number, also called commodity number or goods number or the code number. Then we will have a snap. We will take a snap or a little look to the origin of goods in foreign trade. Then we will make an aspect to the export controls for goods being exported out of Germany, out of the European Union. Then we will have a small touch to the Incoterms. And last but not least, to the regulations of the destination country. Where can you find information? What documents are required? What special licenses, requirements, or product-specific requirements are required? Those will be aspects that I would like to show also to you. And then point number 8, I've prepared some checklists for you, also for the import and also for the export of goods, which you can use after this webinar. Well, let's start with the overview of the regulations for the cross-border movement of goods. When we start at the point here with the prohibitions and restrictions, top right corner, those two words, they contain the prohibitions and restrictions, contain in the European Union lots of regulations. Basically, there is a collection of regulations to be taken care of in terms of imports and exports, like sanitary measures, phytosanitary measures, animal protection, protection of intellectual property rights, the protection of human health, cultural assets, and also the environmental aspects that have to be taken care of. When we move on to the export controls, certainly the European Union, Germany, is a member of all international export control agreements, such as the Wassenaar Agreement or the Nuclear Suppliers Group. So there are lots of regulations to be taken care of when you are exporting products, services out of the European Union. Moreover, when we take down the next step, the customs law, of course, have to be considered when we are moving goods from one country to another, regardless of if it's an import or an export. Within the customs law, certainly we have to take care of the so-called customs procedures. There is some formal aspects to it, like the like the export process or the import process, which has to happen on a general basis on an electrical platform. For instance, in Germany, it's called Atlas. Those aspects also have to be taken care of. The origin of the good can be an important part, regardless if it's an import or an export. Then you can, depending on the origin of the good and the evidences you can provide, you can save duties in terms of either when you're importing into the European directly, or if you are selling, providing goods having a preferential origin in the European Union to the so-called trading partners of the EU, where there is a free trade agreement in place. Then I will jump to the subject value-added tax law. Very briefly, when you are importing goods to the European Union, to Germany, they are subject certainly to value-added tax equivalent to the amount that it is in place within Germany. And when you are exporting products out of Germany, out of the European Union, then those exports are exempt from the value-added tax. The delivery terms, or also called the Incoterms, are also an aspect to be taken care of when you have a cross-border movement of goods, regardless if it's inbound or outbound. And last but not least, again, regardless of if it's an import or an export, you have to take care of the regulations of the destination countries. What kind of documents do you need? Are there product-specific regulations to be taken care of, especially in terms of the production of the good, labeling of the good? And I will show you some sources that you can use regardless if you're importing or exporting into the European Union. The second point that I want to touch is the so-called precondition for import and export activities within the European Union. First of all, of course, you have to set up a company. Within this upsetting of the company, within the setup of the company, you have to register for a tax number in Germany and get a tax identification number. Once you have fulfilled those two steps, then you have to register with the German Customs Authority for a so-called economic operators registration identification number. The abbreviation that is being used is the EORI number. It is the identification of the company against the German Customs Authority. I have placed the application form here as a link so you can use it if you have to apply for so-called EORI number. The customs tariff number, commodity code, or code number that I have touched during my introduction is very important. I call it the heart of the customs subjects of the cross-border movement of goods. As we do speak different languages around the world and have different cultures, the World Customs Organization has brought up a so-called harmonized commodity description and coding system, also known as the harmonized system, where it has unified the first 6 digits and also the description of goods for the international trading. It's called the HS code. And this HS code has been divided by the European Union for the exporters, especially to the 7th and 8th digit. It's called the combined nomenclature. So it's also the customs tariff number that we are speaking of. And this customs tariff number is central and vital, because depending on the customs tariff number, either we are speaking of an import or an export, there are different measures triggered by the number. For instance, the customs duty, the anti-dumping or the countervailing duties, the additional duties, the VAT, the taxes, the provisions and the restriction approvals, licensing requirements and tariff quotas are the ones that are being triggered by the customs tariff number in terms of imports. in terms of the exports, when we look at the other side, the export control measures are being linked to the customs tariff number, preference calculations where the European Union has free trade agreements with countries in terms of the determination of the preferential origin for goods, and also export duties. In theory at the moment, the European Union does not have export duty in practical at the moment, and also the approval and licensing requirements for the goods to be exported. As you see, many subjects that are being triggered by the customs tariff number, so the correct determination is of vital importance for doing business, for importing and exporting. Here is an overview of an example regarding the composition of a customs tariff number for a household dishwashing machine. As we have said, the first 6 digits are internationally, worldwide harmonized by the World Customs Organization. So if I speak of the customs tariff number 842211, a customs expert will automatically know, okay, I am speaking of a household dishwashing machine. And then you can see the subdivisions within the European Union, the combined nomenclature for the export. The EU measures are being taken within the 10 digits, like the subheading of the TARIC, we call it. And also, in order to import into Germany, we are speaking of the code number, which consists of 11 digits. Where you can get support, certainly the manufacturer of a product should be able to help you to determine the customs tariff number for a product. The customs administration here in Germany, here in the European Union, can also issue a binding tariff decision once you apply for it. Generally, it is free of charge, when there are not, when you don't have to make special analysis. We, as the Chamber of Commerce in Düsseldorf, can also support you within this subject, and I've placed a document number here that you can consult. For instance, it's in German language in order to classify a good. The German customs website also has a search function implemented in German where you can look up to 30,000 words, keywords that you can trigger and look up for. And also the European Union has a database. It's called the European Binding Tariff Information Database, the ABTI, where you can see the binding tariff informations donated, which are at the moment active, and sometimes you find very similar products, or sometimes you can find also exactly the product that you want to import or want to export at the stage. The origin of goods in foreign trade, I want you to be aware that one word can have 3 meanings, because the origin can be that we're speaking of, like the first question that you should ask when you're speaking of the origin of a good with your business partner is from what kind of origin is he speaking? Is he speaking about the origin made in? Is he speaking about the origin for non-preferential goods? Or is he speaking about the origin for preferential goods, meaning we have an FTA, a free trade agreement in place? So you have to ask always your partner about what kind of origin he's speaking, because as you can see, there are some different purposes of the different kinds of origin. For instance, the made in labeling is being placed for the oppression of false origin indication. The purpose of the non-preferential origin, where the evidence is the certificate of origin, and for exports, for instance, in Germany, the Chamber of Commerces are the responsible authorities for the issuing of certificate of origin, and the application within this mean is generally the trade measure in the importing country, and certainly for the preferential origin, when we have an FTA, a free trade agreement in place, it's the subject of to taking advantage of the preferential customs duty. Either it's the elimination or the reduction of it. Here you have a specimen of a certificate of origin which is in place in the European Union. You have an application form on the left side, and that would be the original that you would receive when you export goods out of the European Union, out of Germany, for countries, for instance, in the Arab region, where they ask always for a certificate of origin when you are exporting goods in those countries. Briefly to the export control issue, it will just be for you interesting when you are really exporting goods out of the European Union to some third countries. The general premises is here that the export of items, services, capital, payment and other commercial traffic with foreign countries is, according to the German foreign trade law, principally free. However, there are some European and national prohibitions and restrictions. And we can divide those prohibitions and restrictions into three subjects or three categories. The first category is the restriction to items, and when we are speaking in terms of items, we are speaking of goods, software and technology, and from a German perspective we are also speaking from the technical assistance for goods who are included in the so-called dual use regulation of the European Union, or who are included in the national export list. Those goods are identified as technically high-valued standard products that can be used either on a civil way or regarding their technical aspects also for military purposes. If we, for instance, have a pump that has the potential to pump up to volumes that is not standard, that is not normal on the market, then those goods will be potentially listed in the dual use regulations as they are technically on a very, very high level. The second category in terms of export controls that German companies, European countries, companies have to take care of is the so-called embargoes, the country embargoes. The most prominent country embargo, or the biggest that we currently have, is the one against Iran, and secondly against the Russian Federation. And within this mean, we also have embargoes that are prohibiting especially businesses to sanction persons, to companies, organizations and institutions, and you certainly have to take care about those EU sanctions lists when you are conducting business in terms of exports out of Germany. The third category that has to be considered is the so-called critical use. And the critical use can be summed up in a very, very short way. We are speaking here about a military end use and a nuclear end use purpose for products that you are exporting. The Incoterms, as I have mentioned, is something that you also have to consider either when you are importing products or you are exporting products, due to the fact that the Incoterms, they are regulating lots of issues that are critical in terms of moving goods. For instance, they are determining the point of delivery. Who is going to deliver the good up until what point, and who is going to take care of the goods from that point on? Who arranges and pays for the transport and the supplementary services, for instance, at the harbor or at the airport? Those issues are regulated within the correct usage of Incoterms. Which parties carries the risk if steps are not fulfilled? Who carries the risk of transport, and at what point is the risk switching from the seller to the buyer? And also quite vital is the regulation of the cost, who is going to pay for the movement of goods up until what point. Important is that you should consider that is not being considered many times, or there is a misinformation. Incoterms do not address the transfer of ownership. That has to be regulated in the contract itself. The Incoterms do not have a reach to the transfer of the ownership. The Incoterms function on a two-way systematic. On the left side, you will find also always the obligations of the seller from A1 to A10, and the obligations of the buyer, working kind of a mirror way, is regulated from B1 to B10. So always a movement from one aspect to the buyer to the seller, or from the seller to the buyer. Here you have an overview of the current Incoterms that are in place, the Incoterms 2020, which are being used since the 1st of January 2020. That is the latest version. The Incoterms are being updated generally due to the developments in terms of international trade every 10 years. And what you should consider is that Incoterm Ex works and delivered duty paid should be especially avoided when you are doing business export-wise, because Ex works means that you are not responsible for the customs clearance of the goods in the exporting country. So the buyer from a third country has to do it, and generally he does not have a registration with the German customs authority. He does not have an input into the German customs systems, so he's not able to do it. And you will have a difficulty when you place an invoice tax-free and don't have an evidence that you have exported the goods to a third country. Those invoices will be annullated later on. And the other extreme is the DDP Incoterm clause, the delivered duty paid, where you bind yourself to deliver to the importing country, where you have customs cleared, customs paid, and tax paid the goods in a third country. Sometimes it is not even possible to use the DDP Incoterm because you are like, for instance, in Russia, if you don't have a subsidy as a German company, and you will not have a subsidy in a third country, then it is not allowed by certain countries that a foreign party is going to take the role of the importer. Last but not least, let's take a small look at the regulations of the customs, of the regulations of the destination country. For instance, I have placed here an example for exporters out of Germany, out of the European Union, for goods to Russia. You have to have the commercial invoice twofold, meaning two originals. It has to be according to the expectations of the Russian Customs Administration in Russian. If you prepare it in English, they can accept it, but they also have the right to have a translation into the Russian language. Important is that you have to also list the customs tariff number, and as we have learned that the first 6 digits of the customs tariff number are universal, meaning that the 7th, 8th, 9th and 10th digit can be different between the European customs tariff number and the Russian customs tariff number. It is advisable to make a statement that it is the European customs tariff number. A certificate of origin is required in order for goods to be imported into Russia. A packing list is required 5-fold. Depending on the good you are exporting, a certificate of conformity TR or the old regulation GOST will have to be taken care of. It is the case, for instance, when you sell electronical components, medical components, they have to fulfill the Russian or the Eurasian standards that are in place, and also you have to take care of the packing instruments. For instance, wood pallets have to be ISPM number 15 standards that have to be that is treated wooden pallets, so there is no species being imported or harmful species into the Russian market. Those two publications in German language can be helpful. It is the Konsulats- und Mustervorschriften or the Exportbestimmungen in andere Länder, how they are called in German, but also you can use a European digital online solution that is in place since October 13th of last year. It is the so-called access to markets. It is charge of free. You can also get a link of the export of the access to markets from a third country. You have to place the customs tariff number here on the left side, the country of origin of the product and the country of destination, and the website of the European Commission will then give you information about the tariffs, the taxes, the rules of origin to be taken care of when there is a free trade agreement, the product requirements, even if there are specific product requirements such as labeling, licensing, or other requirements, information to customs procedures. Sometimes you can also find valuable information regarding trade barriers, and very, very useful systematic is also that you can look up trade statistics between countries that are being taken place in terms of the specific customs tariff number, and it is possible to use this database for up to 120 markets around the world. I have placed here an example for water having originated in the United States of America. So we are modeling here an import into Germany. The customs tariff number in terms of 6 digits is the 220210. So we know we are speaking of mineral water here to Germany. That is how it looks like. We see that the customs tariff is 6.9% for the US originating goods into the European Union. And on the left side here, in terms of import requirements, we could see the aspects, what kind of specific labeling requirements there exists here in Germany, what kind of European regulations have to be taken care of. And much more important, you will see the responsible authorities. So if you don't want to go through all the regulations that are explained in detail within this database, you can contact the responsible authorities for each subject and clarify them before you import your products or export your products out of the European Union. Last but not least, you can find the link checks or the checklists for the export out of the European Union, and vice versa. You will find the same for products importing into the European Union, and you can use it as a checklist, both ones, even for imports and for exports. And that's it from my part so far. Dear Robert Butchen, you can now take over for the Q&A session. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention.
Yeah, thank you very much, Savas and Katrin. So that was it, 75 minutes full of stuff. And yeah, thank you for your attention, first of all. Thank you for staying tuned. I'm sure that well, I'm sure that you may be a little bit, tired, not tired, but you got a lots of different aspects and themes now from us. You got a really big, survey on many different questions we are dealing with. We have already answered some questions, but of course you are now free to put your questions into the the chat room if you want it like that. But at the moment we do not have any more questions. So, well, we are not too far away from the end of our session. But I won't let you go without leaving you with the info of our contacts. Yeah, you just saw our contacts now on the screen. Yeah, could you maybe put back the presentation, Anna? Yeah. All right, yeah, and there you find the contacts within our department. Yeah, so basically for Europe it's me, basically for Asia and America it's Katrin Lange, and next slide we have a special Russia competence center. So if you have special questions about Russia, please contact Aaron Röschke. And of course we have our team which is looking after the customs law, foreign trade law, among them Savas Poiras and its colleagues von der Volgerburg and Inge Pesch, sorry. And a specialty we have since a couple of months a new colleague which is looking after the assistance of projects in developed countries, yeah, developing countries, emerging and developing markets, Africa, Latin America and parts of Asia. We have a very broad methods of subsidies and promoting the business with these countries. And if you have anything to do with, for instance, Africa, Latin America, just contact our colleague Manuel Neumann. He is in fact sent from the GIZ company. That's the big German company for the development aid to us for 2 years. And there's also a platform for business opportunities, leverage.de. Anyway, you will get the information afterwards. You will have all the time in the world to have a look on what you have been interested in order to review that, to check that. And of course, you can contact us later on. Yeah, you got our contact details and we would be happy to answer your questions and to assist you making your way on international markets.